The sun had just begun to set when the ground shook beneath the quiet forest. Birds scattered from their nests, and the trees trembled as though they could sense something unnatural in the air. In the distance, a flash of light exploded, brighter than anything seen on Earth. It was the crash of a ship from the stars. Far away, a group of humans had been tracking a strange signal. It was a signal unlike anything they had encountered before, coming from a place deep in the forest. The team of scientists, soldiers, and explorers had been preparing for days, expecting to find something odd. But nothing could have prepared them for what they would discover that night. As they arrived at the crash site, the scene was nothing short of terrifying. The wreckage was massive, twisted metal, and burning fragments scattered across the land. A large hole had been ripped into the side of the ship, exposing its inner workings. There was no telling what kind of creature had come from the heavens, but they knew one thing for sure: someone or something had survived the crash. Carefully, the humans moved toward the wreckage. Their flashlight beams cut through the smoke and darkness, revealing a strange form on the ground. At first, they thought it was just debris, but as they got closer, the form shifted. The creature was alive. The alien soldier lay half-conscious, his body battered and covered in dark blood. His skin was a deep shade of purple, and his elongated body seemed out of place on Earth. His limbs were slender, yet powerful, and his face, though twisted in pain, bore an air of nobility, as if he had been a warrior once, respected and feared across the galaxy. He let out a soft groan, barely audible, his alien eyes fluttering open for a brief moment. The humans froze in place. They had never seen anything like this before, and fear gripped their hearts. What were they looking at? An alien invader, a warrior from a faraway planet. They couldn't be sure, but one thing was certain: this was a life they hadn't expected to find. The team leader, a seasoned soldier named Captain Scott, was the first to break the silence. He glanced at his team with wide eyes and gave a sharp order: check for weapons. Stay alert. The others spread out, cautiously surveying the area. No one knew what kind of danger this creature might pose. It was clear that the alien was injured, but could it still be dangerous? As they searched the wreckage, Captain Scott knelt beside the alien soldier. His hand shook slightly as he tried to decide what to do. The warrior's breathing was slow and ragged. His purple skin glistened under the dim light of the forest, and his large, almost humanoid eyes were filled with pain and confusion. The alien's chest rose and fell, struggling for air, and Captain Scott could see the soldier's body was covered in deep gaping wounds. "Should we help him?" whispered one of the scientists, Dr. Ellen, as she crouched beside him. Captain Scott hesitated. The alien was clearly not a threat in this condition. But could they trust it? The crew was supposed to observe, not interfere. "We don't leave anyone behind," Captain Scott replied, his voice low and steady. "Not even this thing." The words came out with uncertainty, but there was no time to second-guess. They had to act fast. If the alien soldier died in front of them, it would be on their conscience. And if they left it behind, they'd never know what secrets it might hold. Captain Scott motioned to Dr. Ellen, who was the most qualified medical professional among them. "Get a scan of his vitals. We need to know if he can survive." Dr. Ellen quickly pulled out a small device from her medical pack and began scanning the alien's body. The beeping sound filled the air, and the results were displayed on her screen. "He's alive," she confirmed, her eyes widening. "He's in critical condition, but it's not too late to help." The team rallied together, working quickly to stabilize the alien soldier. They wrapped his wounds and carefully lifted him onto a stretcher. He groaned again, his alien eyes flickering open for a moment, but he was still too weak to respond. As they made their way back to the camp, the team couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of mystery. They had rescued an alien warrior from the stars, but why had he crash-landed here? What was his story? And most importantly, what would happen now that humans had made the first move? The alien soldier had been abandoned by his own kind, left to die on a foreign world. But the humans had chosen to save him. It was an act of compassion, yes, but also an act of uncertainty. There was no way to know if this decision would have consequences beyond their understanding. And so, as they moved forward, the question lingered. What would this alien soldier do now that the humans had chosen to intervene in his fate? In the quiet of the night, the team couldn't know the answer. But they were about to find out. The night passed slowly, and the silence of the forest seemed to deepen as the human team set up camp. Their base was modest. A small tent, a few scattered supplies, and the faint glow of campfires. But their focus wasn't on their surroundings. It was on the injured alien soldier they had brought back with them. They had carefully placed him in a makeshift recovery area, secured with blankets and medical equipment. His body, though scared and frail, still had an air of strength about it. His skin glimmered faintly in the dim light as they worked to stabilize him. Dr. Ellen kept a close eye on his vitals, constantly monitoring his condition. Meanwhile, Captain Scott sat nearby, his arms crossed and his brow furrowed. He couldn't stop thinking about the decision he had made. They had saved this alien. But what did that mean for them? Was this the right choice? Was it a foolish mistake that could come back to haunt them? He couldn't shake the unease that weighed on him. The alien had been alone when they found him, stranded and vulnerable. But what kind of civilization had left such a powerful soldier to die on a foreign planet? What could they have done to earn such disregard? The crackling of a campfire interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Ellen looked up from her work, catching his gaze. "He's stable for now, Captain," she said, her voice laced with concern. "But we don't know how long he'll stay that way. We need to understand him better, see if he can communicate." Scott nodded, his gaze shifting back to the alien. He had a strange feeling that they weren't just saving a life. They were setting something in motion, something bigger than they could possibly understand. The team had questions that needed answers. Who was this alien? What was he doing here? And more importantly, what was the significance of his mission? They had only seen a glimpse of his technology. The ship he arrived in was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It was sleek, efficient, and far beyond Earth's current capabilities. But even more than that, there was a power in the alien's presence, even as he lay unconscious. It was the power of someone who had fought and survived in a world far beyond their comprehension. As the hours passed, the alien began to stir. His eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, and the soft hum of his breathing became more pronounced. The humans around him tensed as his body shifted slightly, his long limbs stretching in an attempt to move. Dr. Ellen quickly stepped forward, trying to keep him still. "Easy now," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You're safe here. You've been injured, and we're trying to help." The alien's gaze fixed on her. His eyes were large, the color of deep violet, and they locked onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. It was as if he could see right through her, understanding something she could not. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the quiet sound of the forest. Then the alien opened his mouth. His voice was low, rasping, as if speaking had become an effort. "You saved me?" he croaked, the words coming out haltingly. The humans exchanged surprised glances. He spoke, human speech, but with an odd cadence, like an accent they had never heard before. Captain Scott, who had been standing off to the side, took a step forward. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "We did. We couldn't leave you to die. But why were you out there? What happened?" The alien soldier's eyes flickered as if searching for the right words. It took him a moment, but then he nodded slowly. "I was abandoned, left behind by my own. A failure." His voice carried a weight of sorrow, a sadness so deep that even the humans could feel it. He was more than just a soldier. He was a warrior who had lost everything. His species had left him to die alone in an alien world, abandoned without a second thought. Captain Scott took a deep breath. "You were a soldier. What was your mission? Why were you here?" The alien's eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked around as though checking his surroundings. There was a sense of caution in his movements. "My mission was to conquer," he said, his words almost a whisper. "But the war was lost. We were defeated." A cold shiver ran down the human team's spine. Conquer. They had heard rumors of galactic conflicts, of vast empires waging war across the stars. But hearing it directly from the mouth of an alien soldier made the reality more chilling. This was no ordinary being. This was a warrior from a powerful race that had once held the upper hand in the galaxy. Captain Scott exchanged a look with Dr. Ellen. "Who defeated you?" he asked, his voice now tinged with urgency. The alien paused for a long moment before speaking again. "The humans." The word hung in the air, like a bombshell. For a second, there was complete silence. The humans couldn't believe what they had just heard. They, the humans. How was that possible? The alien soldier's gaze turned toward Captain Scott, his eyes burning with intensity. "You don't know it yet, but your species is the most dangerous force in the galaxy." The shock of those words hit like a tidal wave. The humans had always thought of themselves as mere survivors, struggling to make it in an uncaring universe. But now, they were hearing something far more significant. They were hearing that their very existence had become a threat to an empire that spanned the stars. Captain Scott's mind raced. How had this happened? How could Earth, a planet still in its infancy, be the key to a war in the stars? There were more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. They were no longer just observers in the grand scheme of the universe. They were players. And the universe had just begun to take notice. The air in the tent was thick with tension. The alien, who had just revealed the shocking truth, that humanity was somehow responsible for the downfall of his entire empire, lay still, his violet eyes burning with a mixture of disbelief and something deeper, something darker. The humans around him were equally stunned, struggling to grasp the weight of his words. Captain Scott leaned against the edge of the table, his mind racing. How is that possible? Earth is still recovering from its own wars. We barely have a space program that can reach the nearest moon. How could we have possibly defeated an empire capable of this? He gestured toward the alien soldier, whose body was now being tended to by Dr. Ellen, still trying to make sense of everything. The alien soldier, his breath shallow, seemed to understand their confusion. Slowly, he shifted, trying to sit up with the help of Dr. Ellen's hands. The effort was painful, but his resolve was clear. He wasn't going to let his injury stop him from telling his story. "You don't know the power your species holds," the soldier rasped, his voice weak but insistent. "The galaxy underestimated you. You were seen as weak, divided, nothing more than a backwater planet in a distant system. But the truth is," he paused, his eyes searching for the right words, "humans are more than that. Much more." The group exchanged nervous glances. This was no longer just a conversation about a random encounter. Something deeper was at play, something far beyond the small confines of their world. "More than what?" Dr. Ellen asked, her voice almost a whisper. Her mind was racing as she tried to process the gravity of what was happening. "What do you mean by that? How could we, humans, be a threat to the entire galaxy?" The soldier looked down at his hands, as if lost in painful memories. "The species that came before you, the ones who thought they were gods, they're afraid of you. They don't understand your potential. They don't know how you think, how you fight. They see your survival as something that cannot be replicated. And that's what made you dangerous." Captain Scott stood straighter, an uneasy feeling settling in his stomach. "What are you talking about? You're saying we have something no one else has." The alien nodded slowly, still struggling to sit upright. "Yes, you see, the galaxy has always been built on dominance, on power, on overwhelming force. Species like mine, the Gorniks, have always relied on advanced technology and sheer military might. But humans," his voice trailed off, as though the very concept of humanity was something he couldn't fully comprehend. "We've been watching you for years," the soldier continued, his voice growing stronger, though still strained. "We were fascinated by you, your ability to adapt, to overcome. You don't rely on the same rules the galaxy plays by. You fight not just for survival, but for something deeper. You fight for hope." The words hit Captain Scott like a punch to the gut. Hope. That was something he had taken for granted all his life. But hearing it described as a weapon, something that set humanity apart in such a brutal galaxy, sent a chill down his spine. "So that's why they left you behind?" Dr. Ellen asked, her tone soft, as though she was trying to understand. "Because they were afraid of what we might become." The alien soldier's eyes flashed with a mix of pain and bitterness. "They feared you would rise against them. Your planet was too young, too untested. The other species thought it was just a matter of time before you destroyed yourselves. But they didn't account for your resilience, your unyielding drive to survive, no matter the cost." He took a deep, labored breath, clearly exhausted from speaking. "The Gorniks, they were wrong. They thought they could wipe you out in a war, just like they did with others. But Earth didn't fall. Earth fought back." His voice lowered, almost reverently. "And you've won, over and over again." Captain Scott's mind was spinning. All of this, the war with the Gorniks, the politics of the galaxy, the survival of humanity. It was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. Humans had been thrust into a position of unimaginable importance, but they had no idea how to handle it. "So, what happens now?" Captain Scott asked. "If what you say is true, what does that mean for Earth? What happens to us?" The alien's gaze hardened, and his expression grew distant. "It means that they'll come for you. The Gorniks, the other species, they will come. And they'll do whatever it takes to destroy you before you become a threat they cannot control. They won't give up." Dr. Ellen spoke up, her voice firm. "We can't let that happen. We have to prepare." The soldier shook his head slightly, though not in disagreement. "It's not enough to prepare. You need to understand what you're up against. You'll need more than just technology. You'll need strength, unity, and a willingness to fight for your future." The tension in the room thickened. The weight of the soldier's words pressed heavily on all of them. This wasn't just about saving an alien anymore. It was about saving humanity itself. "We can't do this alone," Captain Scott said, his voice resolute. "We'll need allies. We'll need everyone on Earth to unite." The alien soldier's gaze softened just a little, as though seeing something in Scott's eyes that made him trust him. "You're not alone, Captain. But you must be careful. Trusting the wrong people could mean your undoing." The warning hung in the air like a sword poised to strike. The road ahead would not be easy, and they had no idea how dangerous it would be. But they now knew one thing for sure. Humanity was about to face its greatest challenge, and the fight for survival had only just begun. The room was heavy with silence. Captain Scott stood at the head of the table, his eyes locked onto the alien soldier, whose words echoed in his mind like a drumbeat. The weight of the revelation, humanity was more dangerous than any of them had ever imagined, hung in the air, and the implications were staggering. "You're saying that we're not just a target," Scott spoke, breaking the silence. "We're a threat." The soldier, still weak from his injuries, but clearly resolute, nodded slowly. His violet eyes bore into the captain's as though weighing the fate of the entire human race. "Yes, you've already proven it. They thought your species too primitive, too fractured to unite, too weak to even make a dent in galactic affairs. But they underestimated you. Now, Earth is a symbol. Your survival is proof that anything is possible. That is why they're afraid." Dr. Ellen, who had been quietly listening, spoke up, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But why come here now? Why reveal this to us?" The alien soldier shifted uncomfortably, his breathing shallow, as though every movement caused pain. "Because," he said hoarsely, "they've started to plan. The Gorniks Empire is rallying other species, those who are loyal to them, those who seek to maintain their dominance. And they're coming for you. Earth's resources, your very existence. They will not be allowed to stand in their way any longer. Captain Scott's brow furrowed. The idea that humanity had caught the attention of a galactic empire was terrifying enough. But the fact that this alien, once their enemy, had come to warn them made the situation even more complicated. It wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a war of ideologies. And how do we fight them? Scott asked, his voice firm, though his mind was still struggling to grasp the enormity of the situation. The soldier paused, his face etched with a painful memory. You fight by becoming what they fear most. They have technology, they have armies, but you have something they don't. You have willpower, you have resolve. They underestimate your ability to unite when needed. They are wrong. Scott exchanged a glance with Dr. Ellen. They had always believed that humanity's greatest strength was its resilience. But this was beyond anything they had ever prepared for. The idea that Earth had the power to challenge an empire that spanned the galaxy was unfathomable. And yet here they were. Is that what you mean by strength? Dr. Ellen asked, trying to understand. Our willpower. The soldier nodded. Yes, the Gorniks and their allies thrive on fear, dominance, and control. But you fight not because you're commanded to. You fight because it's in your nature. You fight to survive. For hope. And that is the greatest weapon the galaxy has ever seen. Scott crossed his arms, trying to steady himself. This was bigger than anything they had ever faced. He had been in charge of military operations before, but nothing this vast. Nothing that would determine the fate of his world, and potentially the entire galaxy. How much time do we have? He asked urgently. The soldier grimaced, his pain evident as he slowly sat up straighter. Not much. The Gorniks are already assembling fleets. Their allies, those who seek to control your planet for its resources, are moving. They'll strike hard and fast. Your best hope is to act quickly, form alliances with others who might see your value, and prepare for the fight of your lives. Scott nodded, his mind already shifting gears. I'll get the message out. Earth will need to unite. We can't fight alone. You're right, the soldier said, his voice tinged with something almost like regret. You need allies, but trust must be earned. Not everyone will be willing to help you. Some may even betray you for their own gain. Be cautious. Dr. Ellen spoke up again, her voice filled with determination. We won't let them win. Earth has been through too much already. We're not just going to lie down and die because they're afraid of us. The alien soldier met her gaze, and for a moment, there was an understanding between them, a silent acknowledgement of the fierce survival instinct that humans carried in their blood. You will need more than just strength to survive, the soldier warned. The Gorniks are not like anything you've faced. They will push you to your breaking point, and you'll need to rise above it. Your greatest challenge will be knowing who to trust, and how to fight without destroying yourselves. Captain Scott looked out of the tent, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. There was no time to waste. Earth had been thrust into a war far beyond anything they could have imagined, and now they had to fight for their place in the galaxy. The soldier's warning echoed in his mind. Trust must be earned. Get ready, Captain Scott said, turning to Dr. Ellen. We're about to change everything. The atmosphere inside the command center was tense, and Captain Scott could feel the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. The alien soldier's warning had been clear. Humanity was about to face a force unlike any other, and their survival depended on swift action. But the question was, where to start? Scott paced back and forth in front of the massive holographic map, displaying Earth's orbit and the surrounding galaxy. The Gorniks Empire's fleet was still a few days away, but that didn't make the wait any less nerve-wracking. The mere thought of what was coming, the destruction, the loss of life, and the inevitable suffering, was unbearable. And yet Scott knew there was no time for fear. The Earth needed him to lead, and lead he would. "Captain," Dr. Ellen called out, her voice snapping him back to reality. "We've just received intel. The Gorniks have already begun their first wave of assaults, and it's happening across the galaxy. They're not waiting around." Scott clenched his jaw. "Where?" he asked, his eyes scanning the map as he stepped closer to the holographic interface. "There, near Mars." Dr. Ellen pointed to the red planet, where several ships were already arriving. "They've started attacking outposts on Mars and some of the moons around Jupiter. We're not sure yet if they've sent scouts or if this is a full-scale assault, but we can't wait to find out." Scott's heart raced. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. Humanity had been given a chance to prove themselves, a chance to fight back. But how could they stand against an empire so vast, so powerful? "We need to get a message out to all human outposts. Tell them to be ready. Earth isn't going to fall without a fight." Scott turned to his comms officer, a seasoned veteran named Lieutenant Jackson. "Send the warning to every outpost. Mobilize what we can. If the Gorniks are testing our defenses now, they won't hesitate to attack Earth soon." Jackson nodded and began tapping at the console, issuing orders to send messages across all channels. The urgency was apparent in his every move, but even he knew that words alone wouldn't stop the Gorniks from doing whatever they planned. Scott's mind raced as he thought of the alien soldiers' warning. The Gorniks would not just come for Earth, they would come for humanity's spirit. And if humanity couldn't unite, if it couldn't find common ground in the face of this threat, then Earth would fall, just like the alien soldier had predicted. "Doctor," Scott said, turning to Dr. Ellen, "what do we know about their weapons? Can we counter any of them?" Dr. Ellen's brow furrowed. "We've been going through their data, but it's sparse. We don't have much time to figure out how to counter their technology. What we do know is that they rely heavily on their long-range energy weapons. Think of them like giant, planet-busting cannons. They can obliterate entire fleets from a distance before you even have a chance to react." Scott frowned. "That's going to be a problem. But we can't let them take our colonies. Not now." The alien soldier, still weak from his injuries, approached them slowly. He spoke with a calmness that seemed impossible given the gravity of the situation. "You are right to be concerned. The Gorniks are powerful, but they have their weaknesses. They have an over-reliance on their energy weapons. If you can get close enough to their ships, to their command stations, you could disrupt their systems." "Close enough?" Scott raised an eyebrow. "You think we can get close enough to their ships? Those things are massive." The soldier nodded slowly. "Yes, but you must be prepared. They will not underestimate you again. And when you strike, you must do it with everything you have. Their technology is advanced, but they rely on certain strategies. If you catch them off guard, you will have a chance. But only a chance." Scott looked at his crew, the weight of their uncertain future hanging heavily on his shoulders. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about humanity's place in the galaxy. The Gorniks might see them as a nuisance, but Scott knew that Earth was capable of far more than that. They had to make their stand. "We'll send in our best pilots and strike teams," Scott said, his voice hardening with resolve. "We'll hit them before they can fully regroup. But we need to be smart. Hit them where it hurts. Take out their weapons, their supply lines, and their leadership. We make this personal. We make it count." Dr. Ellen nodded, her face set in determination. "I'll get our research team to develop countermeasures. We need anything we can to weaken their energy weapons, even if it's just for a few minutes. It'll be enough." Captain Scott turned back to the holographic map. The stars stretched out before him, but now, Earth was no longer just a small distant speck in the vastness of space. It was a planet with a mission, a planet that was about to fight for its survival. And as he looked at the incoming Gorniks fleet, he felt the adrenaline surge in his veins. He knew the fight would be brutal. He knew the risks, but Earth was ready. "Prepare for launch," he ordered, his voice steady and unyielding. It's time we send the Gorniks a message they'll never forget. The battle had begun. Captain Scott's heart raced as he stood in the command center, eyes glued to the holographic map. His crew moved swiftly, executing every command with military precision. All around him, the room buzzed with activity, the weight of their first real engagement with the Gorniks bearing down on their shoulders. "Captain," Lieutenant Jackson's voice cut through the chaos. "Our pilots are in position. The strike teams are ready to deploy. They'll be within range in 5 minutes." Scott nodded, taking a deep breath. "Good. Stay on the comms and make sure they're aware of the risks. No heroics. We need them alive, no matter what." As Jackson confirmed, Scott turned his attention to the map once more. The Gorniks' fleet had begun its approach, their massive warships looming ominously just outside Mars' orbit. The alien vessels were terrifying in their sheer size, imposing, dark, and sleek, moving in a perfect formation. It was clear they were accustomed to victory, but today would be different. Today, they were facing humanity. The alien soldiers' words echoed in Scott's mind. Strike fast, strike hard. Humanity's first strike against the Gorniks would be a gamble, but it was a gamble they had no choice but to take. He glanced at Dr. Ellen, who was nervously pacing by the tech consoles. She had worked tirelessly, pulling together any advantage humanity could muster. "Doctor, how are our countermeasures holding up?" Scott asked, though he already knew the answer. Time was running out. "We're good for now," Dr. Ellen replied, her voice tense but determined. "We've activated the energy shield systems, but they're unstable. We can only maintain them for a short time. But it's enough to get our pilots close to the enemy without taking catastrophic damage." "Perfect." Scott's fingers drummed lightly on the armrest of his chair as he studied the approaching enemy fleet. They were nearing the edge of Mars' orbit. His mind raced. There was no going back now. "Prepare to deploy," Scott ordered firmly. He could feel the nerves in the air. This was it. Humanity's first real confrontation with an unstoppable force in the galaxy. The stakes could not be higher. If they failed, the Gorniks would crush them. If they succeeded, they would prove to the galaxy that Earth was not to be underestimated. The battle plan was simple, though perilous. The strike teams would launch from Earth's surface, utilizing their fastest ships to bypass the Gorniks' outer defenses. They would be flying blind, relying on their speed and stealth to infiltrate the enemy lines. Once within range, they would disable the Gorniks' fleet's energy weapons, making the big ships vulnerable to attack. And then, the human ships would go in for the kill, a direct assault on the heart of the enemy fleet. As the final countdown began, Scott felt a surge of pride for his crew. They were ready. They were about to take humanity's fate into their own hands. 5 minutes to launch, Jackson called out from the comm station, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. Scott looked over his crew. "We do this together. We stand as one." "Sir," Lieutenant Jackson spoke again, his eyes wide with alarm. "We've just received an unexpected message from the Gorniks' fleet." Scott's brows furrowed. "What does it say?" Jackson hesitated before responding. "It's a threat. They say, you cannot win. Leave now or face the consequences." Scott's lips curled into a tight, grim smile. "Tell them this. We're not going anywhere." He looked up at the holographic display once more, watching the Gorniks' fleet as they continued their approach. There was no fear in Scott's eyes, only determination. Humanity had nothing left to lose. The strike teams moved again, cutting through the Gorniks' fleet like lightning. They were swift, calculated, their movements synchronized. In the chaos of the battle, the Gorniks struggled to adjust, unable to anticipate the humans' every move. But just as the humans were closing in on their target, a sharp warning alarm blared in the command center. Dr. Ellen's face turned pale. "Captain, there's a massive energy surge coming from their command ship. They're preparing to launch a counterattack. This could wipe out our entire fleet." The word sent a chill through Scott's spine. The Gorniks had one last weapon, One final attempt to crush humanity. And if it hit, it would destroy everything. "We don't have time," Scott said, his mind working quickly. "All units, target the Gornik's command ship. We need to take it down before they fire." Humanity's last hope lay in this final strike. The Gorniks were already preparing for their counterattack, and if they fired, the battle would be lost. The strike teams, with no time to spare, adjusted their course, pushing their ships to the limit. "Captain," Jackson said, his voice shaking slightly with tension, "we're in range. All units are locked on. We're firing." The first salvo of laser blasts shot out, streaking through space with terrifying precision. The blasts slammed into the Gornik's command ship shields, but the ship held steady. The alien ship's defensive systems had been built to withstand extreme force, but the humans' weapons were not to be underestimated. Another volley of blasts hit the command ship, this time breaking through the shield and scoring direct hits on the hull. The ship groaned, its outer plating buckling under the pressure. It wasn't enough to destroy it, yet. Scott's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the enemy ship continue to fire at the human fleet, but it was clear that their defenses were weakening. The Gorniks were beginning to panic. They had underestimated humanity's resilience. The humans had not only survived their assault, but had found a way to strike back harder than anyone could have imagined. "Another shot," Jackson shouted, his voice full of determination. The final blow came swiftly. A barrage of energy blasts hit the Gornik's command ship all at once. Sparks flew from its shattered hull as it began to disintegrate in space. Within moments, the alien flagship exploded in a violent burst of light and debris. The Gornik's fleet fell into disarray. Their command ship, their source of coordination and strength, had been destroyed. With their central ship gone, the alien forces no longer had the leadership needed to carry on their assault. But Scott knew this wasn't the end. The Gorniks would retreat, regroup, and return. The war was far from over. But for the first time, humanity had sent a message to the galaxy. They would not back down. They were ready to fight, ready to protect their home. And they had already begun to win. "Victory, Captain," Jackson said, his voice filled with awe. "The Gorniks are retreating. It's over." Scott nodded, the weight of the moment settling in. They had won. For now. But as he looked out at the stars, he knew the fight was just beginning. The galaxy would now know what humanity was capable of. They had taken the first step, and no one would ever forget it.